The sun was just starting to set, casting that golden hour glow across the yard, the kind of light that makes everything look like a memory before it's even over. Marcus Hill stood at the edge of his perfectly trimmed lawn, watching his wife Lana laugh with their kids near the arbor he'd built. The music playing wasn't loud, just a simple instrumental version of their wedding song. It had taken months to coordinate. Their daughter flew in from California. Their son even skipped drill weekend just to be there. Everything was perfect. Then came the sound. Not music, not laughter, but tires crunching over gravel and a door slamming shut with enough force to silence the backyard. Karen Delaney had arrived, the self-appointed queen of the Cedar Ridge HOA, a woman whose idea of recreation was writing citations and quoting made-up bylaws. She didn't wave, didn't smile, she just marched, heels stabbing into the grass like she was planting a flag in enemy territory. "Where's your event permit?" she snapped. "I didn't approve this gathering." Marcus didn't move. He didn't even blink. "That's because you don't need to," he said calmly. "You're standing on private property, and this land's not part of your Karen raised an eyebrow. "It's within buffer zone proximity." There it was again. That phrase, buffer zone. Karen had made it up after Marcus refused to pay into the HOA 3 years ago. She said any land within 150 feet of an HOA maintained road could be subjected to community standards. It wasn't in the county laws. It wasn't in the HOA charter. But Karen didn't need facts, she just needed fear. And in her mind, that meant she ruled everything the sunlight touched. She reached into her folder and dramatically pulled out a neon yellow violation form. Section 1 for be amplified music and unapproved public gathering. Failure to comply within 24 hours will result in cumulative fines. She slapped the form on Marcus's mailbox. Lana looked stunned. Their son, Matt, clenched his fists. Guests were whispering, but Marcus, he didn't raise his voice, didn't even step forward. He simply turned his head toward the camera mounted on the porch beam, the little red light blinking softly. "You're trespassing, Karen." Karen's smile faltered. She looked up, noticed the camera, and took a quick step back. But Marcus had what he needed. Every second of her barging in, interrupting the vow renewal, and acting as if she owned land that was never hers to begin with. He calmly walked over to his wife and kissed her hand. "Sorry, hun, looks like our fireworks just started early." That night, after the guests had gone and the candles had burned low, Marcus sat at his desk, eyes scanning through footage from his motion cameras. There she was, pulling up, trespassing past the private property sign, and walking halfway onto the lawn. Clear as day, audio included. He clicked save and labeled the folder, HOA Invasion. July 3rd. Lana came up behind him, wrapped her arms around his shoulders. "She ruined it, Marcus." He shook his head. "No. She gave me exactly what I needed." Narrator tone deepens. Suspense builds because what Karen didn't realize was that Marcus had more than video, he had history. The land Marcus lived on wasn't just any land, it had been cut out of the Cedar Ridge development plans decades ago by a rancher named Dawson who refused to sell to the HOA. Marcus bought it from his widow years later, and made sure, in writing, that he would remain independent. No dues, no board, no rules from clipboard-wielding tyrants. Karen thought she could bend the rules, until they cracked, but Marcus was about to snap them in two. Narrator slows, voice almost a whisper in the worst part. She didn't even know what was coming. Soft. Pause, then narrator leans in with a call to action. Don't go anywhere, because the next part, that's where Karen takes things too far, and Marcus starts digging into secrets that were never supposed to see the light of day. Marcus Hill had seen a lot in his 55 years. House fires, near-death rescues, budget meetings that dragged into oblivion, but this HOA war was a new kind of fire. One fueled not by flames, but by arrogance. The morning after the vow renewal, Marcus woke up early. Not because of nerves, because of noise. A leaf blower, right outside his window, 7:04 a.m. on a Sunday. He looked out and saw two men in HOA uniforms blowing dust from his driveway, not the street, not the sidewalk. His actual private driveway. When he walked out onto the porch, one of the men, clearly uncomfortable, offered a sheepish wave. Mrs. Delaney said this area needed visual cleanup after the unsanctioned event. Marcus didn't yell. He didn't threaten. He just said, calm as the wind, "You've got 5 seconds to step off my land before I call the sheriff." They backed off quick, and the truck sped off without even turning around. Narrator, darker tone now, but the HOA didn't stop there. No, Karen Delaney doesn't take rejection. She takes revenge. Within 48 hours, Marcus's mailbox was flooded. 5 separate violation notices. Complaints about improper fencing, accusations of excessive outdoor lighting, even one saying a nuisance-level floral arrangement was attracting too many bees. And every single one came stamped with the HOA's Gold Eagle logo and a return address from Cedar Ridge's central office, a building Marcus had never stepped foot in, because legally, he didn't have to. That land, it wasn't governed by HOA policy. Marcus had the deed, the zoning exemptions, and a signed legal agreement from the original developer to prove it. But Karen wasn't playing by law. She was playing by intimidation. Scene. Inside Marcus's office. Framed firefighter medals on the wall. Paperwork spread like a war map. Marcus sat in his chair, laptop open, reviewing each violation form, line by line. They were all based on HOA internal codes, none of which applied to his parcel. He picked up the phone and called Eli Grant, an old buddy from his firefighting days turned civil defense attorney. Hey, I need someone to take a look at a crazy HOA president who just tried to bulldoze my anniversary. Eli chuckled. You're in Texas, right? Yep. Then I'm already mad for you. Email me everything. Marcus uploaded the violation scans, the security footage of Karen trespassing, and the HOA's buffer zone map, which looked like it had been drawn by a toddler with a red crayon. Narrator injects. Humor. Eli called back 30 minutes later, laughing so hard he could barely speak. Bro, buffer zone. That's not a thing. This map looks like a toddler tried to draw a war plan after eating a bag of Skittles. She really submitted this. Marcus smirked. To over 30 households, apparently, and she stormed my vow renewal in the process. Perfect. We've got trespassing, harassment, abuse of power. You want to play defense or offense? I'm thinking full court press. Narrator shifts tone, suspense rising. That evening, Marcus made 3 moves. Quiet, deliberate. He drafted a cease and desist letter to the HOA board, citing legal exemption and documented trespass. He installed 2 more cameras, one by the road, one hidden in a birdhouse by the mailbox, and he built a custom metal sign to hang above the gate. It read, "Private property, not subject to HOA regulation. Trespassers will be prosecuted." But just as Marcus was tightening the last bolt on the post, he noticed a shadow moving across the hedge line. A flash of blonde hair. A clipboard. Karen, watching. From across the road, narrator voice, low and dramatic. She didn't say a word, just stared, then walked away. Marcus watched her go, jaw tight, because something told him this wasn't over. Not even close. Karen Delaney liked to believe she was untouchable. In her eyes, she wasn't just a community president, she was the mayor, the judge, and the HOA executioner rolled into one polyester-bloused package. But what she didn't know was that the very land she tried to claim had a past. One that Marcus Hill was about to dig up. It started with a drawer, a deep, heavy oak drawer in Marcus's office filled with folders most people would have tossed long ago. But Marcus wasn't most people. As a firefighter, he'd learned early on that when things get hot, the details matter. Names, paper trails, forgotten footnotes, and one particular manila folder, dated October 1997, caught his eye. Parcel transfer, Dawson Ranch to Hill. He opened it, revealing an original plat map of the subdivision, handwritten addendums from the late Walter Dawson, and, most importantly, a clause with a thick red underline, said parcel shall remain permanently exempt from Cedar Ridge HOA governance, inclusive of future zoning amendments. Boom. Karen didn't just break the rules. She'd broken a recorded agreement, filed and notarized with the county clerk's office. One that even the original HOA founders had signed off on before Cedar Ridge was even paved. But that was only half the story. Narrator shifts tone, curious, like a mystery unfolding. The other half. That came from Marcus's next call to the county land records office. He requested any archived correspondences involving the Cedar Ridge HOA and Parcel 117B, his land. 3 hours later, he received a PDF file labeled HOA, Dispute Files, 2001-2005, and inside was a goldmine, emails, letters, even court transcripts from when Karen's predecessor, Larry Keaton, had tried to do the exact same thing 20 years ago, rope in the Dawson land under community visual consistency. But back then, Walter Dawson wasn't having it. In a recorded deposition, the rancher stated, "If they ever try this again, tell him the answer's the same. Not a snowball's chance in hell." Even the court dismissed the HOA's claim back then. With prejudice, Marcus leaned back in his chair, staring at the documents. Karen hadn't just messed up. She'd tried to revive a dead fight and pretend it had never been settled. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a full-on cover-up. Narrator, darker tone no and. It didn't stop there. In one of the email threads from 2004, a familiar name popped up, K. Delaney, HOA secretary. That's right. Before Karen was president, she was the right hand to the last guy who got legally slapped down trying to steal authority over the Dawson property. So not only did she know it was exempt, she helped file paperwork about it. Marcus felt the slow boil of anger rise in his chest. This wasn't just Karen being nosy. She wasn't confused. She wasn't overstepping. She was deliberately lying, gaslighting neighbors, and weaponizing fear to stretch HOA power into land they had no right to. Cut 2. Marcus prints the entire packet, binds it, and slides it into a fresh folder. Label, Evidence HOA Misconduct. He calls Eli again. "We've got her. She knew. She always knew. And I've got the paper trail." Eli doesn't even hesitate. "Then it's time to bring the board into this. Let's give 'em a show." Narrator, voice rising with slow burn intensity. But while Marcus was preparing his strike, Karen was preparing hers. That same night, a neighbor from down the road, Sandra Mulrooney, called Marcus in a panic. "Hey Marcus, did you approve a community-wide email about you?" "What? No. Why?" "She sent out a bulletin. Says you're suing the HOA for revenge. Said you threatened her." Marcus's jaw clenched. He opened his inbox and there it was. Subject, Cedar Ridge Safety Update, hostile resident alert in it. Karen painted Marcus as aggressive, uncooperative, and hostile to HOA safety values. She even attached a blurry screenshot of him pointing toward his own property line, cropped out of context from the vow renewal video. It wasn't just petty anymore, it was war. Marcus Hill wasn't a man who liked drama. He'd fought fires, held dying men's hands, even negotiated with an angry rattlesnake once. But now, at 55, retired and just trying to live a peaceful life, he'd somehow been cast as the neighborhood villain. All because of Karen Delaney. After Karen's HOA safety bulletin hit inboxes like a splash of gasoline, things around Cedar Ridge began to shift. Subtly at first, Marcus noticed fewer waves at the mailbox. A few neighbors started walking their dogs on the other side of the road. One guy, Barry something, even turned his leaf blower off when Marcus stepped outside, like he didn't want to get involved. But it wasn't fear that bothered Marcus. It was the lies, too. He did what Karen never expected. He opened his front yard to the public. Scene, handwritten signs, folding chairs, lemonade coolers. A banner across 2 trees reads, "Community Info Night. No HOA agenda. Just facts." Marcus didn't knock on doors or beg people to show up. He just posted the signs at the park, near the post office, and left it at that, and still, nearly 40 people came. Some out of curiosity, some out of concern, and a few, including a frazzled woman named Jean, just to see if the rumors were true. "They said you threatened her," Jean asked quietly. Marcus smiled gently. "Let me show you something." He stepped forward, holding a thick binder labeled HOA Misconduct Evidence, and began walking the group through the story. Security footage of Karen trespassing on his land, her unauthorized interference in a private event, the ancient plat map proving his property was never HOA-governed, and the 2004 court records with Karen's name on them clearly showing she knew the HOA had no authority over parcel 117B. Gasps. Raised eyebrows. A few people whispering things like she knew. All this time, Marcus let the weight of the evidence settle before hitting them with the final blow. She not only knew, she weaponized a false narrative to control you. To control this whole neighborhood. Narrator tone sharpens then, he pulled out her email, the one calling him hostile. "You've all seen this, right?" Murmurs, nods. Marcus raised a remote and played a video clip on a small portable projector. It was the unedited footage, the vow renewal. Karen, barging in, shouting, slapping papers on the mailbox. Marcus, calmly asking her to leave. Not a threat in sight. "This is who I am," Marcus said. "Now ask yourself, why would someone twist this moment into a security alert?" The silence was deep. Then a voice broke through. My niece's birthday got cancelled last month because Karen said bounce houses were optically aggressive. A man named Greg said bitterly. Another neighbor chimed in. She threatened to fine me for having sunflowers in my yard. And another. My kid got cited for chalk drawings on the driveway. The dam broke. One by one, neighbors began sharing their stories. Small, ridiculous infractions and threats they'd all quietly endured under Karen's reign. Some had saved emails. Others had old warnings. One neighbor, Tom, said his wife, cried for 3 days after Karen told her she was visually lowering neighborhood property value. Narrator shifts to hopeful but intense tone. Marcus had known Karen was a problem, but now he knew. She was a pattern. And worse. A pattern with a trail. Eli, Marcus's lawyer friend, had been sitting quietly in the back, taking notes. He stood up, flipping through a thick packet. What you all described, that's called abuse of authority. It's harassment. And if you want, we can file a joint petition to freeze HOA board operations and conduct a formal audit. The crowd went still. Then someone clapped, then another, and soon everyone was on their feet. Karen had counted on silence, fear, isolation, but Marcus, he'd just lit a match under her paper empire. Narrator lowers tone. Cold and focused, and as the crowd dispersed, people approached Marcus one by one, asking if he'd help organize a neighborhood petition. He didn't promise anything. He just nodded. Because while Karen had been ruling through fines and fear, Marcus had just done something far more dangerous. He'd told the truth. They say power reveals character. In Karen Delaney's case, losing it revealed everything. The neighborhood had turned. The quiet streets of Cedar Ridge, once ruled by whispered threats and HOA emails, with words like urgent and compliance, were buzzing with rebellion. Marcus Hill hadn't just defended his own land. He'd handed neighbors a flashlight and pointed it straight at the shadows Karen had lived in for years. But instead of retreating, Karen did the one thing no one expected. She doubled down. 3 days after the community meeting, every mailbox in the neighborhood received a new letter. This one wasn't printed on regular paper, which glossy embossed, and signed with the HOA's official seal. At the top in bold, all caps font. Community Protection Order Emergency Board, ACTO. In the letter claimed that, due to recent acts of hostility and ongoing misinformation campaigns, the HOA was issuing temporary authority to enforce standardization measures on bordering properties, including those within HOA viewable proximity. In simple English, Karen was trying to force her rules onto Marcus's land and anyone else near the HOA boundary by emergency declaration. Narrator, nearly laughing in disbelief, she was trying to create her own law. Like a one-woman Congress armed with clipboards and illusion. But this time, Marcus was ready. Scene. Marcus's dining table covered in paperwork. Laptop open. Phone on speaker with Eli. She's using made-up language again. Marcus said, scrolling. Viewable proximity. That's not a legal term. Eli.com, but amused, replied. This is desperate. What she's doing now. That's a violation of civil boundary rights. It's not just HOA overreach, it's abuse of authority under color of law. She's impersonating power she never had. So what do? We hit back louder, we file with the county, and we notify every homeowner she tried to scare with that fake order. Time to bring in the hammer. The next morning, Marcus mailed individual affidavits to each homeowner listed in Karen's new expanded compliance zone. Each envelope included a copy of the original HOA charter, the 2004 court decision exempting his land, a legal breakdown of Karen's fabricated claims, and, most importantly, a declaration to opt out of HOA enforcement for all properties not explicitly listed in the original formation documents. It wasn't just about his property anymore. He was giving neighbors a blueprint for freedom. Narrator, Sirius Nokrin wasn't just fighting Marcus now. She was fighting the unraveling of her entire kingdom. And she wasn't handling it well. Later that week, a neighbor, Greg Duffy, caught Karen on his security camera sneaking onto his side yard, measuring the distance between his flower pots and his mailbox. Greg posted the footage online with the caption, "Guess who's creeping at 10:47 p.m. HOA Karen strikes again." It went viral. Within 48 hours, the clip had over 20,000 views on TikTok. The comments poured in. She's the clipboard version of the IRS. This woman needs a hobby and a restraining order. Imagine being this bored. Karen's image, once fearsome, was now a meme, and for the first time, she couldn't spin it. But Marcus wasn't done. He walked into the county courthouse with Eli by his side and submitted a civil harassment suit backed by trespassing footage, witness statements, false declaration copies, and a sworn affidavit that Karen knowingly attempted to override land rights she was previously informed about. In writing and in court, the clerk blinked as she read through the folder. "You're filing for a restraining order against an HOA president." Marcus nodded. "Against Karen Delaney, not the HOA. Let's be clear about that." Narrator tone shifts. Steady, powerful, like the tide turning, had overplayed her hand. What she thought was boldness was recklessness. Neighbors started speaking up. 4 HOA board members resigned publicly. A petition began circulating. Not just to recall Karen, but to dissolve the entire HOA structure and rebuild from scratch. With checks, balances, and mandatory term limits. Even local news picked up the story. The headline read, "Texas HOA President Faces Backlash After Power Grab on Private Landowner," and below it, a still frame of Marcus standing by his gate. Beneath the sign that read, "Private Property HOA, Not Welcome." Narrator, cold and firm. Karen wanted power, but she forgot one thing. When you try to rule people through fear, you better pray they never realize they have a voice. Because once they do, you're done. The Cedar Ridge Community Center had never seen a crowd like this. Word had spread fast. Flyers passed from porch to porch. Social media groups buzzing. The meeting was scheduled for 7 p.m. on a weekday, but by 6:30, the parking lot was overflowing. Neighbors stood in tight clusters. Some nervously clutching papers, others exchanging low whispers. Cameras from local news crews were already set up, ready to capture every moment. Karen Delaney arrived just before the meeting began. Her usual confident stride was noticeably shaken. The clipboard was still in hand, but it looked more like a shield now. Narrator voice. Low and dramatic. She was about to face the very community she'd tried to control for years, but this time, Marcus Hill was ready. The meeting opened with the HOA board president calling the session to order, but before she could say much, Marcus stepped to the front. With a quiet authority, he addressed the crowd. "Thank you all for coming. Tonight isn't just about me, it's about all of us. About what it means to live free in our homes without fear of unfair rules or harassment." He clicked a remote, and the projector lit up with images, clear footage of Karen trespassing on Marcus's land, followed by clips from the disrupted vow renewal, and snippets of emails where Karen falsely claimed authority. Gasps echoed through the room. "This," Marcus continued, "is what happened when one person decided to rewrite the rules for her own benefit." Then Eli, Marcus's attorney, took the floor. Legally, Marcus's property has been exempt from the HOA since it was first developed. Any attempts to enforce HOA regulations on his land are not only invalid, they're unlawful. He detailed Karen's buffer zone myth, her unauthorized community protection order, and her trespassing violations. "We have filed a civil harassment suit, and more legal actions will follow if this continues." Karen stood up, lips pressed tight. When it was her turn to speak, her voice cracked. "I was only trying to protect the neighborhood standards," she said. "People need rules to keep property values high." A few murmurs of disagreement rippled through the crowd. "But those rules must be fair and legal," Marcus replied calmly. "Not made-up threats used to bully neighbors." Narrator voice, building tension. Then came the moment that broke the dam. Marcus pulled up an email thread from a former HOA board member, leaked just days earlier. In it, Karen was heard plotting to tighten control over parcels adjacent to the development, including Marcus's land. Despite the clear legal exclusion, the room fell silent. A neighbor shouted from the back, "So, it was all planned. She lied to us." Several board members looked down, ashamed. The county official attending the meeting spoke next. Double quotes, "Ms. Delaney, your HOA has no legal jurisdiction over Mr. Hill's property. Any further attempts at enforcement will be considered harassment and could result in fines and removal from office." The statement landed like a thunderclap. Narrator softens tone, adding a touch of humor after hours of heated debate. Karen's reign was effectively over. Board members started submitting resignations. Several neighbors approached Marcus, thanking him for standing up to the HOA nightmare. And Marcus, ever the gentleman, even joked, "Anybody want cupcakes? I've got plenty to go around now that the party's back on." Laughter filled the room. Genuine, relief-filled, narrator tone. Concluding with suspense but even, as Karen's influence crumbled. The battle wasn't fully over. there were legal appeals, angry emails, and last-ditch efforts behind the scenes. The courthouse in Cedar Ridge was buzzing with anticipation the morning of Marcus Hill's big hearing. Months of legal skirmishes had led here. The civil harassment suit, the cease and desist orders, and finally, the day when a judge would decide whether Karen Delaney and her HOA had overstepped their bounds legally, financially, and morally. Marcus arrived early, dressed in his best jacket and jeans, a symbol of his no-nonsense, blue-collar style. His wife Lana was there, along with a few neighbors who had supported his fight from the start. The courtroom was packed. Local reporters, curious residents, even a few board members from the HOA who'd recently resigned. Narrator voice, slow and deliberate. The judge called the court to order. Eli Grant, Marcus's attorney, stood confidently at the podium. He laid out the case methodically. Proof of the property's legal exemption from HOA governance, documented evidence of Karen's trespassing, demonstrations of repeated harassment, including fabricated community protection orders, witness statements from neighbors, and the damaging attempts to intimidate Marcus and others. Karen's attorney tried to argue that the HOA had reasonable concerns about community standards, but when pressed on the supposed buffer zones and emergency orders, the lawyer stumbled. The judge leaned forward and said, "The law is clear. Any enforcement beyond the HOA's boundaries is unlawful. Further, attempts to intimidate a private landowner with fabricated orders will not be tolerated." Narrator. Tension rising. Then came the moment Marcus had been waiting for. The judge slammed down the gavel. In favor of the plaintiff, relief flooded the room like a breaking dam. Narrator, voice soft and proud. Marcus breathed deeply. This was more than a personal win. It was a statement that communities should be built on respect, fairness, and truth, not fear and false authority. After the verdict, Marcus spoke to the press. "This wasn't just about me. It was about every neighbor who's felt powerless against bullies who hide behind paperwork. We all deserve to enjoy our homes without threats or harassment." Narrator, light humor breaking in. Meanwhile, word spread fast. The infamous Karen Delaney. She was quietly removed from the HOA board, and rumors say she's been spotted selling clipboards on the side of the road. Marcus chuckled when a neighbor joked she might want to take up gardening instead. Narrator voice, turning suspenseful again. But here's the twist. In the final days of the lawsuit, Marcus uncovered something unexpected. A secret HOA audit report. It revealed not only Karen's abuse of power but financial mismanagement, missing funds, unauthorized expenses, and questionable contracts. That report would spark a community-led audit that forced the entire HOA board to resign, paving the way for a brand new, transparent leadership. The dust had finally settled over Cedar Ridge. The HOA board's corruption was exposed. Karen Delaney was out of power, and the community was slowly healing. Marcus Hill stood on his porch one early morning, watching the sun rise over his land, peaceful, free, and finally truly his own. Narrator, voice softens, like telling a story around a campfire. What started as a family vow renewal, interrupted by an overzealous HOA president, had turned into a neighborhood revolution. Neighbors who once whispered behind closed doors were now organizing cleanups and block parties. Jean, the worried neighbor from the meeting, now waved from across the street. "We owe you big time, Marcus," she said with a smile. He shrugged modestly, just did what anyone should do. But even as the community moved forward, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that something else was brewing. Remember that secret audit report from Part 7? It wasn't just about missing money. It revealed a trail that led straight to a real estate developer who had quietly been trying to buy up land on the edges of Cedar Ridge for years. Narrator voice picks up, hinting at new mystery. Turns out, Karen Delaney wasn't the only problem. Behind the scenes, some powerful interests wanted control. Control over property, control over profits, control over the future of Cedar Ridge. Marcus decided to dig deeper. He formed a small neighborhood watchdog group, folks passionate about protecting their homes and keeping the HOA transparent and honest. Together, they started attending county meetings, demanding disclosures, and fighting shady land deals. Narrator chuckles, softly. And Karen? Well, she's reportedly moved to a new town, probably still clutching that clipboard. But Cedar Ridge was done with her drama. One quiet afternoon, as Marcus was fixing a fence post, his son Matt came running up, waving a letter. "Dad, you got something in the mail." "It's from the county." Marcus opened it, eyebrows raised. Inside was an official letter recognizing the new HOA leadership for their transparency and community engagement. A far cry from the old guard. Narrator voice, uplifting. It was more than just a win in court, it was a fresh start? Narrator tone slows, voice warm and inviting. So, what's the real lesson here? Sometimes, the fight isn't just about fences, permits, or who controls the mailbox. It's about standing up for what's right. For your family. For your neighbors. For your community. Narrator leans in with a smile, and sometimes, just sometimes, that fight leads to something better than you ever imagined. Final call to action. If you've ever felt powerless against rules or people trying to control your life unfairly, remember Marcus's story. Speak up, gather, your neighbors know your rights, and don't be afraid to stand firm. Because when you do, you might just turn the tide. Thanks for following this story. If you want more stories like this, full of drama, humor, and real-life triumph, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. See you next time.